All right, good afternoon. The time is 11:59. I'm going to allow a couple minutes for everyone to join the Zoom room today. We will get started promptly in just a moment. All right, we have several attendees logging in. We're just going to give them just a moment. Thank you guys for logging in, whether you're on spring break, maybe you're just getting back into your routine, coming back from spring break, wherever you may be. But thank you guys for joining us today for our Tool Time Tuesday segment, and we will get started promptly at 12 o'clock. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Tool Time Tuesday on April 4th. Where did March go? My name is Mandy Sonnenberg, and I serve as the Assistant PTI Manager at ECAC, the Exceptional Children's Assistance Center. Today, I am joined with Christy Moore and Laurie Ray. Laurie, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. So I'm Laurie Ray. I work at the Department of Public Instruction for North Carolina in our Office of Exceptional Children. And I've given you my title there on the slide. I'm the consultant for physical therapy and for Medicaid reimbursement in our public schools. And I've also given you my phone number. You can always call me if you have questions or something you think I might be able to help with. And I've also provided the link to a resource that I call the North Carolina School-Based PT website. There's some things in there for you that I'll show you in just a minute. So I'm really excited to be invited here. So I'm always happy to talk to parents and try to help you figure out what in the world is going on in special education, and in particular for related services. So I'm really delighted for this opportunity. And the thing I'm going to talk about is a resource that we've developed to assist teams, IEP teams, individual education program teams, to find their way through related service determinations. And so I just want to start with a couple of grounding features of IEP when it comes to related service. So IEP teams, that is the parent, family members, the student. Hopefully, I love having students in the IEP. Makes for short meetings, very to the point, very positive and directed and practical. So I always encourage teams to include students, even if they're younger than what is required. But the teams determine the need for any and all related services. And the way we do that is collaboratively. There's no voting or veto. Sometimes teams will do that, but there's definitely no veto power in the IEP team. It has to be a consensus decision. And one of the best definitions I've heard is that consensus means we can move forward with it. Not that it's what I agree with, not that it's something that I think is the best solution, but it's something I can, in good conscience, move forward with. And I really like that definition, because sometimes we just need to move forward, and we can keep evolving the program, but moving forward can get us some good information when we have disagreements within the team. Another feature is that it's data driven. There needs to be some student information or observation or parent input or something that is data driven. Opinions have no place in IEP discussions. We really want to go from what we see, what is working and not working. And the more we can rely on data, the more I find it comes out of the emotional realm of getting, I know what's best because I'm a PT, and you know what's best because you're the mom or dad or a grandmother or grandfather or whomever you are in the important life of this child. It's not about our role in the child's life or what we know. It's about what the student is doing during the school day. And so being as focused on the data, I think that's usually very helpful for IEP teams when making any determination. We also need to consider if it's educationally relevant. Often I hear discussions about the need for therapy, and I prefer when we can talk about what is the educational need and what is there a therapy that is required for that educational need to be met? I could use some occupational therapy right now. Frankly, I'm disorganized and dysregulated many times. So I find that what is important is when we really focus on the educational needs first, and then what, if any, licensed personnel are required to meet that need or to support that goal. And I'll get into that later. Least restrictive, the fact that we don't want the student to be restricted unless their disability and the information we have requires them to need services or ratios of adults that are restrictive. And related therapy services are restrictive. Having an adult with you is restrictive by nature. And so we consider that when we're considering least restrictive environment. And I like to quote my friend Lauren Holohan, who is the occupational therapy consultant for many years and now works on our SIMR, our state improvement work. She says it's a free and appropriate public education, not free and appropriate public rehab. So we don't do rehabilitation in schools. Students don't come to school for therapy, regardless of their degree of involvement or significance of their disability. Therapy is not why they come to school. They come to school to learn, to be with their friends, and to participate. And then we also want to talk about how we can best invest each student's time while they're at school. The school day it can feel short if there's a lot of needs to cover, so we want to make sure we're investing things well. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And there's a resource that I wanted to share with you. And I put a link here, and I'm going to copy it and put it in the chat. Or actually, should I do that? I'll provide this resource for posting so you can get it. But you can just Google school-based physical therapy, North Carolina, and you'll find this website, which is the NC school-based PT website. And there's a special grouping for family support and advocacy. So you can definitely check out the resources there.
Laurie, you're welcome to put it in the chat if you want.
Okay. All right, I'll do that then, because I like to have it to pull up personally. So excuse my I don't know what you're seeing right now, but while I copy this, and I'll put it in the chat because I like to be able to pull it up myself. My vision is not great. Okay, so that's the family support collection of resources, and there's a lot of things in there. If I find something I think is helpful, boom, I put it right in there because I like one-stop shopping. Like ECAC, that's up here, and there's many things that we want to make easy for parents to find. And then here is the resource that I really am here to talk about. And if I can find my cursor, I just lost my cursor. I tried to be outside in the sunshine because I thought it would be very pleasant, but now I can't really see. Thank you for your patience. Okay, and here is the resource called Determining the Needs for Related Services. And we tried to make this resource very clear. We wanted to make sure that, I'm gonna stop sharing till I get the resource up. We wanted to make sure that we had it so that teams could easily discuss a few questions that might be helpful when they're making these determinations. So I'm gonna wait, sorry, my web access is a little, okay, now it's up. So this resource really came out of my work when I first started in school-based physical therapy in Wilson County. I found I was having the same conversations with parents because they were thinking about PT that they're receiving in early intervention, which covers all of a family's and students' needs, as opposed to physical therapy or related services for Part B, which is the IDEA part for school-based services, which is a component of the therapy that the student should receive, but not necessarily all of it. And so that is a little bit different, and making that change in mindset and understanding of what the law is mandating. I had the similar discussion. So we just collected this, and Lauren Holohan and I put this together a while ago. But when we're talking about the need for related services, First, we have to talk about eligibility. So you get your eligibility determined for special education and related services. They go together. Once you determine that a student is eligible for special education and related services, they're eligible for all related services. So we ask those 3 questions. Does the student have a disability? Is the disability causing an adverse effect in their school day and in their educational performance? And that can be academic or functional. And then is that difficulty that they're having to the degree that they require be removed from the general education curriculum? There's no way we can shift it, change it, adapt it so that they can access and make progress. We have to remove them from the gen ed curriculum and create their own educational plan. And so if we determine yes for all of those questions using the student's performance data by consensus of the IEP team, then once we know they're eligible for special education related services, we turn to developing the program, that educational program or the IEP. And so we found these questions to be really helpful. If the team, and it kind of flips things over a little bit, and this is what I'm talking about right now. If the student does not receive this related service, for example, physical therapy, if we don't decide to provide physical therapy, is there reason to believe that they will not be able to access an appropriate education? And if the student does not receive the physical therapy, is there reason to believe they will not experience educational benefit? And what are those reasons? What information do we have to indicate that is true? And so that way we can get a very practical conversation going about the student's school day and where their needs are coming from. And so these are some additional questions we got from Michael Giangreco, and I can't recommend him more highly to you. He's done a lot of really good thinking about related services and also the use of one-on-one assistance, other adults in educational settings. And so I really recommend him to you, and I'm happy to come back and talk about some of his articles if you want to do a little journal club. But he poses these questions, which I find really interesting for teams to think about. So can the need that we're discussing be addressed appropriately? And that's a key point by the general education teacher or the special education teacher, or by other school faculty or staff, a nurse. I had a custodian that was really fantastic at engaging young people in interactions with each other. And so, you know, I'll leverage anybody. We want our kids a part of the school, participating, hanging out, talking, laughing. I love it when a student with special needs gets in trouble, because that means they're really in the mix. And that's what we want. We want to leverage everyone to that. Could they benefit from their educational program without this related service? Is it truly required? Or is it something that is comfortable and we just don't want to let it go because we don't have information that they are struggling anymore, but we like that OT. She's really helpful and she has a good perspective. It really needs to be something that the student requires. Could this need or therapy service be provided during non-school hours and allow those school hours to be invested in education and participation and learning? And does including the related service in their program present any undesirable or unnecessary gaps, removal from time that they should be receiving instruction, or is it required? That's really that last question, is it required? And so I find these questions are helpful in really getting a focus on that student's performance during the school day. And I think the more time that parents and teams spend discussing the needs and who is the best person to meet those needs, does it require someone with a healthcare license to do it? Or is this, and I like to think about this about practice. Students with disabilities need a lot of practice, as we know, to gain skills. Is a licensed person required for that practice, or is the practice just something that's needing to be done during the school day? So that's a really key question that I think IEP teams should talk through. And I'm seeing that there's some maybe questions in the chat, and so I'm going to stop there and see what you guys have to say.
Okay, sure. So we do have a question in the Q&A. I'm sorry, would a student receive related services based on evaluations only, or would a school give related services such as PT, OT based on outside therapy evaluations?
So that is an excellent question, and something that's often confusing, because this therapist is telling me one thing and this therapist is telling me something else. What's wrong here? These guys need to get on the same page. And I think the issue is because of a struggle that we have about the source of the information. When you are getting evaluations from community providers, they are looking at all the student needs, everything that young person may require, and every area where they may need assistance at home, in the community. The school evaluation is focused completely, and let me see if I can, I did put a slide together. Hold on, let me stop sharing and go back, because I did anticipate this. So when we're talking about evaluation in particular, the PTs and the therapists, the OTs, speech pathologists at school are really looking at these educationally relevant questions. What does the student need to participate, access, and make progress through the gen ed curriculum? What is supporting or limiting this student's performance? What do they need to access their campus, learning, and the classroom? We're not asking, do they need PT? Or do they need OT, or do they need speech? That's not the point of the evaluation. Evaluations for school-based practice are based on testing, observation, and input from the full team. And so we only consider needs associated with that educational setting. And that is, so PT's PT wherever it is. But for IDEA, for the mandate by the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, we have a scope of focus that is the school day, that is educational performance. And so we don't consider things like, taking a shower at home, or sometimes riding a bike can be, if it's part of a preschool program, or if it's part of a transition program to access the community. But most 8th graders are not working on biking skills during the school day. It's not really educationally relevant for an 8th grader. And so we really have a focus for educational relevance. And so community evaluations don't have that focus. And so using some of that data may be helpful. We can consider it and may be informative, but we really need to focus on what's educationally relevant. And so that is a different focus of our evaluation. And so they may have helpful information, but not necessarily all the information we need, and not necessarily focused on educational needs. Does that answer your question?
That was very well put, Laurie. And Laurie even helped me understand that. So I think so. Yes, she said yes, thank you. We do have another question, if you're ready. Okay. How does this come into play with transition? For instance, when a high school student needs OT with life skills and their post-secondary goals, but told it's not directly access curriculum core classes, so doesn't apply.
Okay, so I'm so happy for this question. So I encourage you to get into the curriculum. And in particular, when we're talking about adulting, I like to call it adulting. And I'm not sure if your student is accessing the general education curriculum or if they are on the alternative, but there's alternative, I forget what they call that.
OCS?
Extended content standards. So if they are on extended content standards, there is in particular 2 electives that are possible from the extended content standard. One is around vocation, and the other is around kind of what I think of as that adulting, the independent living skills, self-determination, things like that. I strongly encourage you to look at those curriculum, those extended content standards. If your child is on the extended standards, look at those two curriculums. And when I'm stopped talking, I can find those links and put them in the chat if people can hang around. I don't know where our time is, but and if not, if they are on the general education curriculum, I encourage you to look at healthful living, the healthful living curriculum, particularly for physical education and health, has a good bit on making good choices, understanding your body, and some of the things that you need in order to, make good decisions and understand your body. So I encourage you to dig into the curriculum and see where your child's needs may align with curriculum standards and bring them to your IEP team for discussion.
Does that answer your question, Allie? And we can follow up. We have about 10 more minutes, Laurie, just to let you know. Let's see. I think we have some stuff in the chat. Whoops, hold on. It just disappeared on me. Deborah said parent counseling and training is also a related service.
Yes, and that's a great point, Deborah. Thank you for bringing that up. And parent counseling and training can be done by any related service provider. I as a PT, during as a transition activity, I had some grandparents that were caregivers for a young man who needed a positioning program. So I went to their home a couple of times as a transition activity to help them figure out, how are we going to do this positioning program that they've been carrying out at school with two 80-year-olds caring for this young person. So we had some problem solving to do there. And so that was a transition activity. So one thing you can do is request some training as a transition activity, in particular when it comes to those adulting skills or those independent living skills. What's it called in the gen ed curriculum? Healthful living. It's the health and PE curriculum, healthful living. And you can find it under the essential standards. And I'll find these. Find these and put them in the chat if you guys can hang out a little bit.
Yeah, great, thank you. We do have another question in the Q&A.
Okay.
If a related services professional and an outside agency is providing services within the home, their focus would be on activities of daily living, correct? Not an educationally relevant focus, correct?
Right. There should be evaluation and student and family input, youth and family input about what's important. Why are we getting therapy, and having that to drive the goals. So a outpatient provider or a home health provider can work on all kinds of different self-determination and skills in the community. I encourage you to see if you can't find places in the community your child or your youth wants to be engaged, and see if you can't get the therapy there.
That's a great point, Laurie. All right, let's see. No more questions in the Q&A. Let me bump over to the chat.
I see. What was the therapy called? Transition activity. So as a part of your post-secondary transition plan, which is within the IEP, after a student is 14 or older, we start talking about transition planning. And that's what do we need to do in these last few years, but to get the student ready for whatever they're going to do after school. And so you set a transition goal, which is usually a big goal, like Laurie will get a job for pay, or Laurie will live on her own with this described support system in place. Laurie will be able to have 2 things to do in her community that she enjoys. Big goals like that. And then under those big goals, we have what are called transition activities, the things we need to do to make that big goal happen. And related services, special education, adaptive physical education, counselors, nurses, anybody can be involved in those transition activities. But it needs to be part of your post-secondary transition plan and associated with the goal that you have set forth as what your post-secondary transition goal is.
Deborah, I'm sorry, go ahead, Laurie.
And Beverly Caldwell is your consultant that works most heavily with post-secondary transition. She has a great set of resources. So if you look up post-secondary transition on the Office of Exceptional Children's website. You'll find some good things there.
The same person asked about the transition activity, said adaptive what? You mentioned adaptive. Maybe.
I don't remember saying adaptive.
Okay.
Oh, I said adapted physical education. The person that does the physical education, if your student gets specially designed instruction for physical education.
Yes, adaptive physical.
And it's adapted. Yeah. Yeah, it's adaptive is equipment. That's the nature of the equipment. It's adaptive. Physical education requires a person to adapt it. So it's a verb. So it's adapted physical education. I took a blood oath with some APE teachers that I have to say that every time.
And then Deborah put in the chat a plug for the pre-employment transition services STAR program that includes job exploration, counseling, self-advocacy, and workplace readiness for
fantastic
kids. I'm going to get the age range wrong, Deborah. You might want to put it in the chat. Is it 14 to 26? I'm going to get the age range wrong.
Well, while Deborah does that, so I'm going to launch a Zoom poll. If you don't mind answering a few questions, the grants we work on require that we report back to them. What we're doing is useful, relevant, and high quality, and we truly do value your feedback. So I'm going to
I think Mandy might be having some internet connection issues. So she is going to launch a very quick evaluation poll in the chat. If you guys could take just a quick second and answer that, that would be very helpful for us. We are largely funded by grants. And so this helps us with our reporting requirements. Yes. Laurie, is it okay if you send me the slides and I PDF them and send them out?
Absolutely. And I'm looking for the links now for that, curriculum.
Perfect. Yes. So what we can do is we can send up a follow-up email with a link to the recording, the slides, and then some additional resources and information that Laurie would like to share with you guys. Thank you so much, Laurie. That's great. And Deborah, yes, the pre-employment transition services STAR program is ages 14 to 22. Any child in North Carolina that has an IEP 504. My dog found a squeaky toy. Sorry, y'all.
Okay.
All right. I think we have something in the Q&A. Please repeat the adaptive versus adapted.
Yep. Hold on just a second. I've got a extended. Sorry, I can't type and okay. So, and I think my I don't know if my links are going out to the full group, Christy. If you can maybe make sure that's going, because I think mine might just be going.
Let's see here.
So what I said was for physical education, which is a direct, and I'm happy to come back and talk about adaptive PE for you as well, but physical education is a curricular standard. And if your child requires specially designed instruction in physical education, that is a direct education service called adapted PE in North Carolina. And adapted physical education is not adaptive because physical education by its nature doesn't adapt itself. It takes a person to do that. So it's adapted physical education. I think that's what I said.
And I see that somebody commented that the poll's not showing up for them. From my experience, it depends on what kind of device you're on. So if you're on a cell phone, it may not show up for you. Let's see. And we have something else in the Q&A, I think. Nope, actually that's done.
Okay, so
chat. And yeah, I put the extended content standard link in the chat. So your comments, Laurie, are set to only go to hosts and panelists.
okay.
So if you put links in the chat, I can, and I will send these out.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Well, if you don't have any more questions, and Karen, we'll send this out to everyone that has joined